Yeah, I know. All right, so my name is Bastian Heist. I also have a SAP background, which is why I smiled earlier when you said that. And while I did SAP at Merck, I also did freelance web development, and that was what brought me to Sandstorm, basically. And then I started with Neos because, Sandstorm does Neos. And Sandstorm is the company I work for. We're based in Dresden and Darmstadt. We do basically web projects which are quite challenging technology-wise. We try to be at the cutting edge. And we do Neos, we do Flow framework quite a lot, but we also do other stuff like React and Java. And well, we don't define ourselves by technology, but more by being innovative and creating cool technological solutions. So as a developer, great place. And of course, we're also looking for people. So if you absolutely want to do a Neos project after today's meetup, then come and talk to us. Good. My talk is called 0 to Live in 20 minutes. When I heard that first, I had to think about what it means because the title doesn't come from me. It came from Jens. It was his suggestion. And my interpretation basically of it is to show you what the typical first 20 minutes of a Neos project look like. So I'm going to do the basic setup and installation, which doesn't take very long, and then I'm going to show you a very simple example of how to customize Neos. So live coding, as you all know, is a quite stupid thing to do. So if it works, you'll see a working Neos site at the end. If it doesn't, you'll see me scrambling to fix any bugs that occur. In any case, there will be entertainment, so that's good. Right. These are the things you will encounter, set up. I'm going to talk about what a site package is for a moment. I'm going to show you the node tree. All the content is organized in the node tree in Neos. We're going to have a look at node types quite closely, and then how to connect these with Typo Script 2, which is going to be called Neos Fusion from December on, from the next release on. And finally, templating in Fluid. So quite a bit of content in this presentation. And now I have to try and switch from one thing to another. You can see my console. This is already good. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is challenging. I don't see what I type. Right. The first thing we need to do is basically just start the Composer project, or download the project. This works simply by doing Composer create project. And then hopefully the internet is quite fast and we'll see it downloading pretty quickly. Oh, cool. As I said. That's it. There we go. Now, excited to watch. It takes a few minutes to download everything. And while I do that, didn't actually think about what to say at that time. So I guess you'll just have to wait. Everything is based on Composer, as you can see. So while the installation is running, you're going to see some nice code scrolling down there. And then once it finishes, we've got everything we need. Maybe this is quite interesting, what you actually need to run Neos on an environment is only SSH access. Basically, you need command line access, and you need Git, or rather Composer. You don't really need Git, and that's all. So now Neos got an own built-in web server, which is built on top of the PHP built-in web server. And once we do that, you'll be able to see our Neos site running already. Takes a minute or so on the first run because it needs to build up caches and stuff. Everybody looking at me expectantly.
So you don't
yeah, sure. You don't need my video, of course, or my presentation to remember that. It's on neos.io. Now, while this does its thing, good. We've got our server, and I'm going to move that over, and you're going to have a laugh because another error. But this one this time it's intended, because what we're going to do is we're going to input some typos. We're going to start the setup. And the setup basically, when you start a fresh Neos project, does everything for you need in your local development environment. You can also do this on a server, basically. But what you usually do is you develop your project locally somehow, and you push it to the server via Git. So the setup is usually a local thing. Now what it asks me to input is the setup password. The setup is secured. And this is by default in here. So once I've got the setup password, I can start executing the setup. And the intention of this is basically to secure it while it's on a server. Locally, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but here we are. Now it's going to do some requirements checking. We need an image manipulation library, and then we're going to set up the database. I've got a database installed locally, so I'm just going to tell it to create a new one and call it Neos Meetup FFM. Let's see if we've got the next error or we get through this smoothly, but usually the setup works just fine. Just takes a bit at the beginning. Right, now what I'm going to do is to create my administrator account. With a very secure password. Okay, this is basically the basic setup, and now what it asks me to do is to create a site. And to create a site, we need a site package. Site packages are basically the templates for your actual running sites, and site packages contain everything that is related to a site in Neos. They contain your node types, which we'll get to later. These are basically the types of content you can have in a Neos site. They contain all the configuration. They contain the Typo Script, which is needed to, with which you can configure rendering logic. And of course the templates, how your site looks. They can also contain the content when you export it. And basically anything that is related to one site is in the site package. From a developer's point of view, this is basically it. A site is an instantiation of a site package. And then what we're going to do is we will create a new site package for our demo. I'm going to call this Neos FFM.demo. Then newsdemo.com, that doesn't really matter. Also tells you here to notice the difference between a site package and a site. Right, and once I've done this, we're basically already done with the setup. You now know why it takes 20 minutes to set up the new site, because 10 of them are waiting for caches to build up. But it's not that slow once you do it again. Okay, we're basically through, and we can now access the Neos backend just by going to our URL /Neos and entering the user which I just created. And then we've got the Neos backend up and running. Let me just make this a little wider. Right, now this is the Neos backend, not too much in it there because I didn't import the demo site, but I created a new one from scratch, so this is totally empty. What you basically have is at the left side you have your site structure, which we'll have a look at in a minute. In the middle you have your content, quite a lot of it. And then on the right side you have the so-called inspector, with which you can manipulate sort of the non-optical properties of nodes, for example. And then creating content in that site is quite easy. You just add a new page and call it first page. And then maybe add another one. And this builds up step by step the node tree of the site. You can also drag and drop here. Right now I can't drag and drop. Let's publish this. Need to publish everything because I'm now on a different page. Now I can also change the order, or I can put one into the other, and you can see that there's actually something going on here. We've got a menu now, and that was there before, but since I didn't have any pages, I didn't have a menu, of course. Now adding content on the page works basically the same way. You have at the top, you have the structure of your pages, and at the bottom you have your content on the page you are on. So if I want to add content, this is basically what I do. I just create, for example, a new text node, and then I can put some great content here. Right, maybe an image. So this is, let's see. I think these are too large. This should work. Not the perfect image, but you get the, Prototype Brewery is a very cool Neos project, which I want to show later. Right, so this is how you work with content. You do it in a very graphical way. You don't really need many forms or something. It's or very much of it is inline editing, so you can edit the content as it is on your live site.
Maybe later on you could load the demo package just to show how it looks like when it's complete filled up.
Yeah, we can create another site with the demo package. Just maybe to say a few words to the node tree. We've seen two trees. We've seen one at the top, which contains the pages, and we've seen one at the bottom, which contains the actual content. But in reality, this is only one tree, and you can the content in it is only distinguished by the node types that it has. So a page or a document is just a node type, and a text node or an image node or anything you can think of is just a node in the tree. And you can basically search this tree and slice it and rearrange it during your rendering in Typo Script. So you can do very magic things with this tree, very cool things with this tree, and this makes it very flexible. What we've done, or what we're doing right now in the project, is we're running this basically as a content repository, as a content provider for an app. And this fits together very well with React Redux, because you can basically just take the content tree and stuff it in Redux, and you've got your state, roughly speaking. And this makes it very flexible because the tree is not constricted by any artificial stuff. But node types, we've seen that already. You can add node types just by clicking the button, and then you can choose between them. And the next thing I'd like to show you is to create your own node type, which is quite easy. Before we do that, I'd like to make the very ugly demo site a little prettier, just a little, and add the bootstrap, basically the bootstrap CDN stuff in there. Now, let's open this as a new project. And of course, like any good TV cook, I tried this before, so if things go very wrong, I have a place to copy from. But it should work if I find the right folder. Now what we're going to do is just edit our basic page template, which is called, I think I need to go through the tree. I'm going to go to my packages, which is in packages sites. Can you halfway read this? And then under resources, private templates, we're going to find our page template. And in this page template, what I'm going to do is just input the stuff from Bootstrap CDN and some JavaScript. This is, by the way, already fluid, which we'll get to later. And then if that works correctly, we should see a little optical improvement here. If I hit the right key. Right, now it looks at least halfway decent. Okay. Now we can create our first custom node type. Node types are basically what Neos is all about. Node types are whatever you can think of. If your designer designs a cool content element on your page, let's say a slider or whatever, this is what is usually translated into a node type. It's one repeating content element on your website. And node types basically consist of three parts from a technical perspective. We've got a definition, which basically says what is it, what can it do, what properties does it have. We've got the Typo Script, which defines how does it work. And in most cases, this is really simple, or you don't even need it at all, as we're going to see later. And then at the end, you've got your fluid templates, which is basically a templating language, just like Twig or any other. And there you define your HTML templates and you define what your node type looks like. Now, since we've got Bootstrap in there, the node type I'd like to build is a Jumbotron node type. And the first thing I will do is basically create the node type in YAML. This is what YAML looks like. You may know it from other projects. And as I said before, I'm going to, let's see if I can enter the presentation mode so you have at least a little bit of, all right, this looks better. Now, we've got our node types.yaml, and we will just add this here and say, we'll call this storm. Oh no, I need to namespace it correctly. Neos FFM demo Jumbotron. Right, this is the name of my node, and then I can define how it's going to appear in basically in the pop-up that appears when I try to add a new node. So we're going to give it a label, which is called Jumbotron, and we'll give it a group, which says where in that pop-up it appears. General. Oh, caps lock. As I said, live coding is a stupid thing to do. What we're also going to do is we'll make it inline editable, which we're going to need later, because we want inline editing for this to be enabled. And then one thing that I do is there is basically inheritance in the node types. You can define parent node types and child node types as you would in any programming language, and this will inherit from our generic Typo 3, it's still called Typo 3, Neos content. Right. And now with that, it should already appear, if I didn't forget anything. Let's refresh this and have a look. Oops, is unintended. No. Right, there we've got our Jumbotron already. Now if I try to add this, it doesn't really work well because it doesn't know, well, it knows there's a node type, but it doesn't have a template, it doesn't have any properties, it doesn't have anything basically. And we're going to fix this, of course, by giving it some properties. Properties are basically just data fields that you can define freely as you want. I'll call one Typo. Typo. It's going to be type string. And I'll add another one, which is called text, which is also type string. And now the next thing I need to do is I need to tell Neos how to, or where to put this, where to render it. So I'm going to switch to the template, or basically I'm going to create a template for this node type. I can stay in here. Templates for node types are by default located in resources private templates, and then we're going to create a folder called node types, and in this we need the node name, so it's jumbotron.html. Right, and now if I try to put some fluid in here, or let me just copy the bootstrap stuff basically. So we have a template to work from. There we go. Now we've got our template. And now our Neos site should know how to render this. There we go. Now, of course, this is now very static because it's all static HTML in it. And in order to make this more, in order to make this flexible, actually, to make this configurable, I need to tell Neos basically where to render the node properties. And then the first thing I need to do actually is to import a namespace, because to do that I need a view helper. Namespace Neos Neos view helpers. And then now once I've imported this, I can add it and use it. Neos content element edit. I'm going to tell Neos to render my title property at this place. I can also use self-closing. Right, and now if I switch back to my Neos site, and once I reload this, too bad. Namespace, name, content element. Any typo in there?
Du kommst auf den Tauschen Namespace.
Ah.
Nochmal View und dann.
Right, of course.
Das ist nicht die Presentation Mode, sondern oben bei View gibt es noch eine zweite Option.
Was denn? Distraction Free Mode?
Nee, okay. Ja.
Okay. Right. So, little typo. So far it's going quite well. Not too many error messages. Property was not set as a template variable. And I think my mistake is here that I added these parentheses, which are actually superfluous. So I told Neos, okay, Neos, please render an editable content element at this place. And now once I refresh this, I have the possibility to add my own content. Hello, Neos Meetup. And that's basically all there is to it on a very low level, right? That's how you can configure your own node types. And then, of course, there are many complex or more complex use cases for these kinds of things. But in the end, it all boils down to defining a node type and thinking about what properties it has, and then defining that in a YAML file and in the template in the end. Maybe as a second example, which is something I have prepared actually because it's a bit to type, is we can add a text to that. Let's see. So we can add a link to that button and a label to that button. I'm just going to copy that from another project. Now I added 2 additional properties. Just going to enter the presentation mode for a minute. We've now got a button label, which is also a string, and we've got a button target, which is basically the link that I want to the button to point to. And now, as you see here, I've put this, which basically tells Neos, okay, this is not a normal string. It's you should please use the link editor to edit this string. And then that tells Neos to basically, yeah, use, you'll see that in the inspector I'll be able to change that. There's just one more thing which I need to do in order for it to show up. I need to add a group, which basically tells the inspector on the right side that, hey, there's a property which I'd like to show up on the right side, and I'd like it to show up in this group. And now once I refresh the Neos backend, we will see that there is now a button label which I can edit here on the right side. We've got our properties button text, which isn't wired to the template yet. And we've got our link editor, and here I could, for example, put https neos.io just by adding that editor. And now in order for it to appear in the template, in Neos, all I need to do is basically change this here. Button target, which basically just tells us to put that there, and then we've got the button text here. Okay, the next time I'm going to figure something out about that presentation mode. A bit stupid. Right, and now we can configure also the content that our button has. However, something seems to not have worked out. Let's see what I did wrong. Looks good. This is something to remember if you develop Neos. Or basically delete the cache. Sometimes there is, well, we're in development context, so usually the caches are thrown away by themselves, but this doesn't always work perfectly. So if you have issues like these and you think this looks correct, why doesn't it work? Sometimes it's related to the cache. It doesn't happen too often, but it does happen from time to time, so this is a very handy command. And now it takes a little bit because it needs to rebuild all those caches. And once the page reloads, hopefully we're going to see the our Jumbotron content element directly. And of course, since I've deleted the caches, I've also deleted my session, so I need to log in again. No. Looks like this time this wasn't the issue. No, this actually works. It's just a... I know what the issue is. Yeah. I invented a property called button text, but actually it's called button label. So if I try to output a variable or a string that doesn't exist, Fluid will just render nothing. Right, now I can freely configure my Jumbotron right side here, and change that to go to Neos. And it will appear. It won't appear because, no, it will. Okay. I think I had to add reload if changed, but that's fine. Yeah, but basically this is what we do to create node types, and it's once you've gotten around to understanding how YAML and Typo Script, which we haven't looked at yet, and the template play together, you can build quite complex and sophisticated stuff with it. Just to switch back to the presentation once again, we've seen that, YAML, and we've seen this, the Fluid template. And what's actually in between and where a lot of the magic happens in Neos is Typo Script. I didn't really need Typo Script right now because all I wanted to achieve is that the properties I define for the node type in YAML go to the template. And Neos does something called auto wiring, which basically takes all the properties a node has and exposes it to the template as the variables I can then use in Fluid. But if we want to do more complex stuff, for example, if we want to pre-process a string, if we want to search for maybe a string that's defined in another node, or if we want to show actually content from another place on the site, or basically any complex stuff you can imagine, you can use Typo Script or Fusion, as it's going to be called. And this is basically what Neos did for me right now. It knew automatically that I want to take all the properties from the node and insert it into the template. So this basically Neos wrote automatically behind the scenes. But I could also do it explicitly, and this is what it would look like. It's basically I define the variable I want exposed to the template and query the node. It's sort of a syntax inspired by jQuery, which I can use to query a node for its content. I can also, for example, find a parent node in this scenario and then output always the title of the current page to a certain place, or yeah, anything you can imagine you can do in Typo Script. There are people who say in the Neos community that Fluid is entirely unnecessary, you can do everything in Typo Script. Right, now let's imagine that this is everything we want to achieve, right? This is our live site, and if we wanted to go live with that, we could basically deploy it to Heroku. There's a custom package built by Sandstorm, which makes it easy to deploy that to Heroku. It adds the proc file for you, and all you need to do is push that basically with Git to your Heroku instance. Or what we do is we use Doku, which is basically mini Heroku, which you can host yourself, and then you could deploy this very easily within a few minutes. I'm not going to do that because it's going to be more waiting for the console, and then I think we've had enough of that. But one thing I want to do, which demonstrates the flexibility quite well, is a project called Prototype Brewery, or formerly Typo Script. And what they've done is they've built a product on top of Neos, which is basically a rapid prototyping tool. And I'd like to show you a quick video of what they've done with Neos, because I find that to be quite interesting.
Prototype Brewery.
Oh, need to move it to the other screen. There we go.
It lets you hit the ground running with just a simple idea.
And they've basically taken that idea to the next level.
Blackboard where you can communicate your concept at a very early stage as a responsive and fully interactive web prototype. It's content driven, so you can play with your copy and images to swap them around until just right. Because everything happens in the browser, you get the feeling of what's working or not pretty quickly, so you can fail fast to succeed sooner.
What they've done that basically is they have taken what I just did to the next level and taken, I think it's Foundation for them, but yeah, they have built all Foundation components that exist as node types, and you can just go to Prototype Brewery and basically build a live site with Foundation without doing anything, which is quite cool for rapid prototyping. Right, I think I've covered my 20 minutes. You have to believe me that this is now a live site, and we've successfully created a site with Neos. But this is usually what the first, maybe 10 minutes, if I didn't have to talk all the time, minutes in a Neos project look like. You install the stuff, and then you start defining your node types. You start thinking about what your node types are, and you define them one by one. The advantage of this is once you've got a basic idea of what properties your content has, you can insert real content quite quick, and then you can work with real content and change the design of it, and basically get a good idea of what your site is going to look later, because you can play around with it very well. Right, that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions? Jens, you asked me to set up something with a working demo site.
Just to explain it, because what you need to understand for those who never used Neos is that you actually edit right inside of all HTML content there. So you're really 100% on the real acting website. So that there's no CSS conversation changes between a back end and a front end actually. So it's a real representation of what you see. And that's a huge change to how Typo Script is working today, where everything is abstract, edited in the back end, and then somehow published to a front end, and then you may see it doesn't fit, and so on. So all fonts are right, or all paddings to images, and everything is just as the real website is. And that's completely different to most of the other CMSs you have. And with the power of YAML, Fluid, and Typo Script, you could not only use it for content stuff, but also for database queries or everything, actually. So it's dramatically fast to develop things compared to other systems. Or if I look to what happens in .NET, for example, how long it takes to just render a stupid table and get data out of the database, compared to what you could do here, where it's done in 2 minutes or so, or even less. That's the game changer for me, why this is so powerful and easy to use.
Yeah. Actually, I think there are like these two sides to it. The one is, you know, in a normal system, or like many other CMSs, what you usually do is you have your customers' requirements and you have to cram them somehow into what the CMS provides. You know, the CMS provides you pages and text and images, but actually what you would like to do is think about products or I don't know, campaigns, for instance, right? So what you usually do in many CMSs is that you create a page for each product or a page for each campaign, for instance. But that's what. But actually, what you can do using the node types, what we've just seen, is that you can actually create a campaign itself or a product itself with exactly the right properties which you need in your project. And I think that's one of the big differences. And the second is what Jens has already mentioned, is that this can be done, rendered extremely flexibly, and also output in the ways you want them to be. So I think that's like the two main big differences actually.
When I compare, when compared to something like, for example, WordPress, which is not a very good example because it's not really a CMS, but nevertheless, you have a very good separation of your actual content and the real content without any optics, without any markup, because it's just nodes. It's just something that has properties. And you can render this however you want, and you can render it differently in different places on your site. Right. Now, this time I've imported the Neos demo site, which looks like this in the new version. And if we go to the backend, you get a better idea of what working with content in Neos feels like, because there's actually more content to work with. Just increase that in size so our other stuff is covered. Right, let's have a look at the site. Now I can just, go there and change that and work with the content as it is and not as it looks in some form. So that's the cool thing about it. I can change it at every point. Basically, I can insert a YouTube video or do whatever. It's a very flexible way of working with content and a way which you can imagine very well.
Questions, comments, or feedback?
Okay, then I guess I'm done for today and can now thank you. I'm quite happy actually that it went through rather smoothly. Ist nicht da.
Dann.
My screen flow has somehow disappeared, but I'm going to figure that out. Well, Sebastian, there we go.
All right. So